Now to add the footstep sound effect, if you have done this before, you know that you can go to the assets and animations, and inside of an animation, for example, this one here, any random animation, actually not the crouch, it's probably the running that we need to find. So for example, this one, you know that you can go in here, right click, add a notify in the notifiers, and then play a sound effect. And when you do this and you select a sound effect here in the sound queue, and you just click on play, you can see that it's actually working, and you can copy this sound effect, paste it, and try to put it together with the footsteps just like that. Something like this, for example, just like that, and it will work in game as well when you play the game. However, I did this and I wanted to record it for you. However, it does bug a little bit because when you run, sometimes it plays the sound two times because on the other animation, you also have this. So you have to put this on all of the run animations. And when you switch animation from back to front or to back right to back left, sometimes it actually plays the sound two times at once. And it sounds a bit buggy. So I don't really like this method. So I tried another one. So let's close this down and let's try something called a timer by event. So in this lesson, I just want to explain to you what this timer by event is because we are actually going to use it more than once. And it is a very, very important concept and function inside of Blueprint. So let's go to the player. Let's go to the player base. Now for the running, I just want to put it to maybe here in the movement event. That will make the most sense. So let's take all of this, and I'm actually going to push it down slightly so I can work here without any restrictions. So let's go here at the end of the movement code, and let's drag from here and write timer by event. And we can go ahead and select this one called timer by event. You can also write timer, and you can see what you can do. So you have timer by event, timer by function name, and this is almost the same as the event, but you can see what this is after you have understood what set timer by event is. So let's select set timer by event. Now for this event, we have to add a custom event. Here you can see this input. So you have to drag from here and you have to write custom event. And then you have to call your custom event something. For example, I'm just going to call it play footsteps sound effects. Play footsteps sound effect. Now it asks you here, what is the time you want to loop this? For example, let's write zero point 0.5. And now I'm going to select here that this timer is looping. And I'm just going to click on this arrow again. Okay, so now it is a looping timer and it's going to loop every zero point 0.5 seconds. So if I drag from here and print a string and I can click on play, and here you should see when I run here and I stop my code, you can see that it runs every zero point 0.5 seconds. So you can see it actually prints hello every zero point 0.5 second. And you can see this better if I just change the color, for example, and in the duration, instead of just 2 seconds, I put it to 50 seconds. So if I click on play and I move and I stop, it's going to run the code. You see every zero point 0.5 seconds, it's going to say hello. If you put it down, you can see every zero point 0.2 seconds, it's going to say hello, as you can see here. So we can use this timer to run some code. And in this case, we're going to use it to loop the footstep sound effects. So when you're running, it's going to play the sound effects. Okay, so for this timer, at some point we need to stop the timer, else it's going to loop forever and your code will crash at some point because you have spawned too many instances of this. So let's right click and promote this to a variable, and let's call this one footsteps sfx timer handle. So it's called a handle if you hold the mouse over it. It's called a timer handle structure. So I usually just call it timer handle at the end. So footsteps, sound effects, timer handle. So now we have this, and later on what we can do is we can take this and say clear and invalidate timer. So this is when we want to stop this timer at some point. We can go ahead and use this clear and invalidate timer. But for now, let's just delete it. Yeah, so that was actually it for this lesson. So let me just change this one to something like zero point 0.5 to begin with, because remember, a timer runs every time every this amount of seconds. So for example, if you write zero point 0.1, it's going to run 10 times a second. So you can imagine you don't want to put this to something like that, because imagine how many times this will run. If I say hello and I click on play and I run and I stop, you can see it's going to spam this code. And your game, you can see my game is actually crashing and it's lagging a lot. So don't do this. This is really bad. I like to stay at minimum value. If I really have to go very low, it is zero point 0.3 or maybe zero point 0.2 in rare cases. But usually I try to stay at zero point 0.5, 0.4, 0.6. That is if I really need to run it a lot of times. Again, what I said before, you can always go to your internet browser and you can say, for example, 1 divided by 0.01, then you can see how many times it runs. Usually, I don't like to go over 60 times a second. So I write, for example, if you write 0.03, it runs 33 times a second. And sometimes this is okay, don't worry. Sometimes this is necessary and you will know when you need it. So when you can stay up like this, that is a lot better. This runs the code 16 times. You can see 0.03, you run the code almost or actually double the amount of time as 0.06. So try to stay as high as you can here, because that will be really optimized. For me, right now, for the footsteps, let's just run it as zero point 0.5 seconds, so 2 times a second. And we can always adjust it later when we need to. So let's delete this one, let's compile everything, and let's move on to the next lesson.